Hello, everybody. Welcome to People Ops School, where I have the great honor of talking with the very people working to make work healthier, more human, and more creative. Joining me today, I have Matt Bradburn. Matt is a co-founder of the People Collective and someone I look up to immensely when it comes to people ops. Matt has 10 plus years of experience designing and implementing talent and people ops strategies for tech companies across the world. Thank you for joining me today, Matt.
Thanks so much for having me, Mary. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to chat people ops with you. To be fully transparent, this is a new project, and this is my first interview. So thanks
Oh,
for kicking
really?
off with me. Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
I feel excited to be the guinea pig.
Yeah, I couldn't ask for a better partner in crime.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure we'll make some mistakes, and then you can edit those out later.
Yeah, perfect. Cool. Let's dive on in. I think something I have been noticing as I've been doing some people operations consulting work is that people operations can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your take. What does people operations mean to you?
I've learned more than ever that great people operations teams can act as a real force multiplier for the whole business, right?
Hmm.
And it's kind of you're there to design organizations to be effective if you're doing so in a really great way. And that kind of comes from all aspects from the kind of more traditional HR aspects, which you've got to have, right? Like you've got to have some company policies legally, literally,
Mm.
and to make sure that everyone understands what to do when things go a little bit pear-shaped, and what to do to support people as well, so
Mm.
that you've got some clear lines of engagement there. Through to a talent team who can hire amazing people.
Mm.
And really act as that kind of flywheel of growth for
Mm.
the team there, to DEI teams who can work to make sure that we're building inclusive and engaged organizations, to learning teams that can really dig into the needs of people in businesses to help them grow. So I think that idea of being a force multiplier is what we definitely want to see it as. Unfortunately, too much it's seen as either the police
Hmm.
or a joke, like Toby Flenderson style,
Yeah. Yep.
classic Toby, or as something which should kind of come second to things like product and
Right.
engineering. But actually, if you don't look after your people well, then you don't have anyone to build a great product, and you don't have anyone to sell your product. You don't have anyone to market your product. So without the people, you've kind of got nothing.
Yeah. 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 Of course, I'm in like nodding my head over here in full agreement. I think there's something really interesting on your website and kind of related to what you're chatting about here. On the homepage of People Collective, there's a phrase on we work with growing teams to avoid people debt. And so I'd love to hear first a little bit about the work that you do at People Collective,
Sure.
and then a little bit on the concept of people debt that you were maybe hinting toward already.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we started the company about 2.5 years ago because all of us had been people leaders within scaling businesses. We had made a ton of mistakes. I got so much stuff wrong
Mm.
during my time there, but
Yeah.
also learned a huge amount along the way, and got to work with some really inspiring, some great people. And I wanted to help organizations avoid the pitfalls that I'd seen other companies go into before. Uh,
Hmm.
so that kind of sets the tone right, because those pitfalls, when you kind of neglect to think about designing an organization quite early in the development of the business, say
Yeah.
10 people or 20 people or even 50 people or even 100 people. If you're not designing at that point,
Hmm.
you're going to end up with what we term as people debt. And for us, that's it's like the accumulation of all of your problems. It's a bit like technical debt in
Yep.
engineering. So
Yeah.
it's that lack of written ideas, lack of spoken communication. No one really knows what they're doing. You can't kind of jump into the organization and just crack on and go.
Hmm.
Instead, you've got to kind of unpack and untangle
Hmm.
all of the spaghetti ball and messes that have gone
Hmm.
before, right? And that's the really painful bit. So that could be anything like, right, you've left it to this point, so no one knows what career progression looks like in a
Right.
business. There are no clear levels. Your pay is decided at random.
Mm.
You've got someone who has the director of design title when really now you're a 200-person company. They should basically be just like a senior designer
Right.
maximum. And they don't want to give that title up anymore,
Yeah.
obviously. All of this kind of mess. And
Mm.
that's what we try to help companies avoid in the first place, or unfortunately, sometimes fix.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
I
there's
mean, it's
something.
something that you've come across in your work as well.
Yeah, 100%. When you kind of started that off of like people collective is something I wanted to create because I've learned from my mistakes. I can definitely relate to that. And I think there's something you were saying at the beginning around for some early teams, they just don't know. And they don't know like what they should be investing in. And that it's a lot easier to create a career framework when you're 10 than when you're 100. Um, and I really, really like this term people debt because like you mentioned, like some people, maybe more technical founders, are familiar with the idea of technical debt, and so we can kind of bridge that gap of knowledge. And I think that's really interesting because of something else that you mentioned at the beginning is sometimes people ops isn't taken very seriously because it's not revenue generating or people just haven't like maybe gone through the pain of realizing that, oh, like we are in people debt now, we need to fix things.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear, maybe I'm going to flip these questions around because you started to talk about what it looks like when people don't truly invest in people ops from the start.
Yeah.
And so I'd love maybe if we can just like go one step further of being explicit and talk about like what happens when organizations don't do that.
Yeah, I think I mean, we see a variety of different things at different stages, and I think that's a really important thing to bring in here, right? Is that the problems that you see and the solutions to them tend to change stage to stage of development.
Mm,
It really snowballs, right?
right.
If you think you've got problems at 10 people, then believe me, you're going to have 10x the problems at 100 people. And
Mm,
if you think that problem's already keeping you up at night at 10 people,
right.
you are not sleeping at all when you're hitting 100. So definitely get it fixed earlier rather than
Mm,
later. But when companies neglect to fix that stuff, I mean, you've got the kind of high level things, right? So you've got retention problems, you've
mhm,
got so generally attrition problems. You're going to get regrettable leavers. You're going to have people you're not going to be able to hire the right people into your organization.
mhm,
You're not going to get those sales leaders ramped quickly. Again, you pointed out kind of bridging that gap with technical
mhm,
teams. If
mhm.
I'm talking to a finance leader, I'm like, right, what's super important when you're growing your sales team?
Right.
Uh, that is making sure that they ramp super fast,
Mm,
right? So how do we ramp your sales team fast? Well, we get
mm,
them onboarded quicker. We give them a really good contextual knowledge of the product. Make sure that they understand our sales process.
mm,
Make sure that they get a really good insight into the life cycle of our customers. And I'm like, great, cool. So do you think your half-day onboarding program gives your sales team that? No, I don't. Right?
yeah.
Uh, or it could be, if you're thinking moving from onboarding to general growth.
Mm,
This is my favorite all the time.
mm,
So particularly product-driven startups
mhm.
with large engineering teams, you take your two best engineers, and then because they've been with you for a couple of years, you make them your engineering managers.
Yeah.
You have no idea if they want to be a manager,
Mm,
or they might say, I want to be a manager just because it comes with a pay rise and a new
mm,
title, and who doesn't want a pay rise? And, that sounds nice.
right.
But actually, no one has any idea if they're going to be a good manager.
Mm,
Suddenly, you've got these people in managers who are such good engineers, really adding a lot to your organization, being able to ship product, quality product, do it fast. Now they're having to manage like 3 or 4 people each. The
mm,
people underneath them are frustrated. The new engineering managers are frustrated because they've got
mhm,
management not actually push code into production. And they're like, what on earth is going on? And suddenly your team goes kaput.
mm.
And want that either. So like actually thinking about who is going to be a great future manager, how can I train them up, what should they look like, what traits am I looking for, how can I balance what this is going to be. Maybe I should just give someone some more money,
Mm.
or maybe we should have career paths which don't only promote management as the only way to go, all of that kind of stuff, right?
Mm.
So there's so many kind of quite visceral and tangible problems that this causes for companies, which all are pretty painful.
Yeah.
We try to help them avoid.
Yeah. I love the second example you shared, because it sounds like you've seen it a lot. I've seen it a lot. Of
Mm.
quickly growing teams, potentially confusing the idea of like being a really strong individual contributor, someone who has like a well of depth and knowledge in a specific area, and having that translate into like, okay, this person will be a good manager, and then they go through the hard parts that you listed out perfectly of figuring out that it doesn't work. And then you quickly mentioned something that I'm going to ask you to expand on around designing a career framework that um, prioritizes or incentivizes
Yeah,
individual career path equally as a manager. Um, and that's something I think like you and I talk a lot about, think a lot about, but maybe for those who are not as familiar with it, can you kind of just give like a high level overview of what you mean by that?
yeah, definitely. But it's a good point, and I'm going to do. This is something I end up doing with my clients all the time. So I'm going to use my arm here
Perfect.
because this is what I'm reduced to on Zoom these days.
Yeah.
Not do nice whiteboards and throw things around in the background because I'm in my spare room. Uh,
You go get your kids finger paints and use that.
Yes, I should. I absolutely should get the under the sea finger painting out, and then we'll just do it by that. But yeah, when you think about a traditional company and like a modern industrial company,
Mm.
like the only route to progress, the only bar you have to go through at some point is to become a manager, right?
Mhm.
And therefore, you get a responsibility that's driven by being responsible for a small group of people and their outputs as well. But actually, not everyone has the confidence or the capability to be a great manager. So you get a bunch of people kind of going through that doorway who should never be going through that doorway in the first place.
Mhm.
And it's not good for them. It's not good for the company, etc. So instead, what about if you shifted that to here, so that there's one manager pathway, and then brought out another one here for ICs? So you've got
Mhm.
like great opportunities for managers to progress, but at the same time, if people are super great at kind of specific with specific skills, knowledge, or behaviors that you want, and they want to kind of add to your team without managing people, let's just give them more money and
Mhm.
have them have opportunities to mentor people whilst going up a track in an equal way to managers, and give them that same level of respect as well. I think that's one of the key things, if you talk about going deeper in it, that we see as a challenge there is that traditional mindset means that people tend to think about managers as automatically being like more senior and better.
Mhm.
So that's one of the hardest parts to break, is like,
Mhm.
actually, no, this person who is now equal level with you, yes, you manage them, but they may well be paid more than you.
Mhm.
And they actually might be more senior, but you've got to be super explicit on the roles there and making sure that you're clear on what that means in terms of responsibilities.
Yeah, cool. I love that. I think um, a specific phrase you used really stood out to me around like it's a really hard thing to break.
Yeah.
And I think that's one reason I really enjoy like following along with you on Twitter and the work you're doing with People Collective is I get a sense of kind of like it doesn't have to be the way that it's always been. Or just like we can think
Right.
about this in a different way, and it doesn't have to be like this just because it has been this way.
Yeah, and that's we feel the same kind of seeing the way that you write. Someone like Jennifer Kim as well, like love what she writes as well
Mm.
on Twitter, and it's just brilliant to see. There's other people that do this as well, loads, but
Mhm.
someone like Lars Schmidt as well,
Mhm.
like people who actually care about making a change, that can see that there are patterns which could be broken, and ways of improving things that could make organizations more effective. So it's lovely to see and connect with people across the globe who are doing this in different ways, shapes, and forms.
Yeah, yeah. we started maybe with like the scary version of what it looks like when you don't invest in people ops and you find yourself in people debt. But maybe we can flip the question around and talk a little bit about like what does it look like when an organization truly invests in people ops from an early stage? What can that version of your company look like?
Yeah, I think the what the ideal that you want to get to, you're never going to get to anything perfect, right? Like,
Right.
I think you got to state this from that there is no wonderful nirvana
Yeah.
where everyone has the best, most perfect company
Mhm.
experience, and everybody gets along all the time, and the company does super well, and nobody does anything bad,
Right.
and nobody does anything silly or foolish or
Mhm.
whatever. Because quite frankly, people are people. And so what I
Yeah.
love about our job is that actually left, right, and center, random requests come in, people try and do things in different ways, and you're constantly trying it's like solving a Rubik's cube that's
Mhm.
kind of automated to try and try and do the opposite, right?
Mhm.
And you're like, oh god, I'm trying to fix this whilst the cube is spinning around in the other direction. So I think that you have to admit that there is nothing perfect, but in your kind of ideal world,
Mhm.
you have an organization where uh, people are motivated. And allowed to be motivated
Mhm.
by what motivates them, right? Like they don't have to be like a cult where everybody follows this like one company line that's written above the door.
Right.
Uh, Weird. Some companies push that.
Uh-huh.
They recruit people as if you were talking to humans and not talking to robots. And they're not trying to like ask them how many jelly beans you fit in a Boeing 747 because we all know that those questions don't work anymore.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like an onboarding process where the end result isn't like pretty swag on your desk. Yeah, cool. Give them a t-shirt. I've got no problem with that. That is not your onboarding process.
Mhm.
It should be like really engaging, lots of understanding and context about how the business works, like what communication channels should I use for what, like when should I use Slack, when can I
Mhm.
use WhatsApp, when do I use emails, all that kind of stuff. Way more important. Managers who are inspiring, who are engaged, who actually care about your career development and progression in the business,
Mhm.
and an executive team and this is the absolute key part, right? An
Mhm.
executive team that has set this in motion, believes in it, cares about it, and works with the rest of the team to make it happen.
Mhm.
Because if your executive team don't believe about it and care about it, then it ain't never going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm summarizing and not fully capturing all of these pieces, but it's a little bit of like just treat humans like humans.
Yeah, right. It's like be pragmatic
Mm.
about this stuff, and just think before you kind of create a process, and don't kind of try and solve for every eventuality all of the time, because you're never going to be able to, because people are people,
Mhm.
and you're always going to have some outliers. But if you can treat the majority of humans as well as possible, like you would treat anyone else, your family, your friends.
Mhm.
Uh, no, they don't have to be a family. No, we're not all a sports team. But just like another human being, and then we can all go and do great work together. Wonderful. Let's
Mm.
do it.
Yeah. I think I have one last question, and there's kind of these tropes that you're throwing out around like a company as a family, a company as a sports team. These things that you and I are both kind of like see and roll our eyes or laugh at. But I think largely, and something I'm hearing you saying is that people ops comes from learning. You're not going to get it perfect from the start. It takes a lot of intention and practice. So I'd love to end with a question just around like, what is something you wish you had known sooner about people ops, whether that's a mistake you've made or just something that you've gotten a little bit clearer on in the last few years that maybe wasn't as crystal clear in the beginning.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I think I was discussing this with my co-founder the other day. That we can each of us very openly say that we have learned more in the last 2.5 years than the
Mm-hmm.
kind of combined 8+ years of our career before that, or like 8+ years each, right?
Yeah.
16+ years combined. This is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, being able to I always thought I wanted to work for one company for a long period of time and see that grow
Mm.
and scale to XYZ. But actually, I found it far more fascinating to go into 30, 40 plus companies at seed, Series A, Series B, and see how they approach these things earlier, then what impact that has on their growth.
Yeah.
That's been more fascinating. But to make it more granular, I think there are we're learning things the whole time, and I'm going to pick out two. One of which is probably more surprising considering the way that we look at people ops,
Mm.
and one probably less surprising. So I think the first one, the more surprising one, is um, I am, as anyone who knows me well and who's worked with me, I am not the biggest fan of process.
Mm.
Either, well, partially because I'm terrible at it myself, and that's why Al, my co-founder, comes in. He's great at process,
Mm.
loves it. And B, because I know it can hinder things. But actually, having clear written down processes that work, that are just simple enough for people to read, oh boy, do they make a lot of difference.
Mm.
So absolutely, like, just think about writing them as if you were a human to other humans, and making them super simple. Just get that stuff down.
Mm.
Absolutely. Um, and the other cup, there's two more now. Two more, then I'll finish, I promise. So the other one is policies can actually be really useful. HR shouldn't be the police. We talk about these kind of tropes that come out.
Mm.
But actually, do you know what I learned recently is that if you can write your policies in line with what the kind of philosophies that you have as an organization, and you think about, like, what values are we trying to say to our teams, instead of just copying and pasting someone else's policies and sticking your logo at the top of it, which everybody does at
Mm.
some point or another.
Yep.
Actually think about, like, what does this mean in terms of, like, how we approach maternity and paternity leave, or how we think about mental health
Mhm.
equally to physical health, or whatever it is. Like, does that reflect who we are as a company? Again, policies can have their place in like an actual useful modern people ops way.
Mm.
And the last is, and this is a really simple one,
Mm.
never, when you're talking about compensation and reward, never use the word fairly. Because
Mm.
everyone has an entirely different view of what fair means in their head. It
Mm.
is turns out fair is the most subjective term I have ever come across in the English language, and I never knew that. And I've learned that over the last couple of years. So please, 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 when you're dealing with comp and reward, don't use fair, because you will never make it fair for everybody.
I think that one's really interesting and super specific. And so I have a follow-up question. Another word you see a lot with compensation is competitive.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same way about that one?
Yeah, pretty much, right? Competitive against what?
What?
Well, we're competitive against market. Cool. Which bit of the market? Would that be
Mhm.
10th percentile or the 90th percentile of the market?
Right.
Because you're not really giving me much info there, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I think that the less the more clear you can be, the better, right? We looked at some benchmarks. These are the benchmarks we're using, circa 50th percentile, say. For some teams like engineering, we know it's really tough
Mm.
to hire, and we're going to pay in the 90th percentile for those teams. But actually, dear marketing team, we're going to pay in about the 75th percentile.
Yeah.
That's how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. I feel like the theme across those things were be explicit,
Yeah,
write down process, write down policy, be smart about your words.
yeah, yeah. Always be smart about your words. 100%.
Cool. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today, Matt. It was great to have you as
Thank you very much for
guest
the
number one.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to come on. It's a pleasure to actually have a proper conversation, an unwritten one,
Mm.
which is great.
Yeah, awesome. Have a lovely rest of your day, Matt.